Welcome to the Juniper podcast, where we talk about the more nuanced aspects of having a pet with some of the most interesting people in the pet space. I'm your host, Allison, the founder of Juniper, and I'm joined by Haley, writer from Juniper. Take us along on your daily dog walk and don't forget to sign up for Juniper. It's free and you'll get access to articles, guides, and discounts on the best pet brands and more at www.juniperpet.co. Let's get into it. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Juniper podcast. We're so excited to have Sophie with us here today. Sophie, I know Haley and I are both really big fans of yours and Simon's. And so we're super excited to have you here and chat with you today. Can you give us a little intro about yourself, who you are, tell us about Simon and all of that?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me. So my name is Sophie Vershbow. I am a freelance journalist based in New York City. I also have a full-time marketing job. I run social and influencer marketing at Eventbrite, the ticketing company. And so I really split my career sort of between the writing side and the marketing side. And then, as I said, I live in New York City with my dog, Simon, who I've had for the past 3 years. Anyone who follows me anywhere on social media knows that he is a very big part of my life and a really great addition to everything I do.
Yeah, we love him. He's like such a superstar too. So how did you get Simon and where did you find him? And what was the beginning of your story like becoming a dog mom to Simon?
Yeah, so I actually did not grow up with dogs, which surprises a lot of people. I always joke, I think I knew some not amazing dogs growing up. And so they were yeah, I was all right, I have cats, no big deal. And then in my 20s, I dated someone with a dog who I completely fell in love with this dog and was oh, this is what everyone has been talking about this entire time. And that relationship did not last, but it really kicked off my love of dogs. And so when I got out of that, I was all right, I need to get my own. I need to get involved. And I really wasn't ready to have my own yet. And so I started fostering. And so I was fostering with the rescue. I ended up getting Simon from Hearts and Bones. They bring all of their dogs up from the Dallas area in Texas. And they just do the most amazing work down there where there's really a huge rescue issue, homeless dog issue, I guess you would call it. And so I adopted Simon in the summer of 2021. He was my, I think, 5th or 6th foster dog, in a row with Hearts and Bones. And by that point, I was all right, I'm ready to be done saying goodbye. Any freedom I love in my life is sort of a moot point now. I just want a dog. And I always say, if someone had said this about their romantic partner, I'd be shut up. That's such an annoying story. But I saw one picture of Simon and I knew it was a done deal. I saw one picture of him in the transport coming up the next week and was I need this dog. So I technically fostered him and foster failed, but I was very, very ready to keep him.
Wow. So I'm surprised you went into foster first. I feel that is Haley and I always talk about that's our favorite way to get a dog because you know that it's going to be a good match. You had them in your home for a while and all of that. So you were fostering a few dogs beforehand. Was that hard to get into for you, especially coming from, not being in the dog world to just going straight to fostering? Because it seems almost a level of dog ownership to foster.
Totally. So I tell everyone to foster. I think not only is it just the most rewarding personal experience you can ever have, but it is the best way to pick the dog that you want to actually have in your home. If you're someone like me who had only had one very specifically senior dog that I lived with, which really wasn't representative of the overall dog ownership experience, I learned so much about what was and was not going to work for me. So when I picked Simon, I knew I wanted an adult dog over the age of 2. I knew the size I wanted. I knew the temperament I wanted. You really come to understand this dog might be amazing, but they're not amazing for me and for my lifestyle. And the best thing about fostering or foster to adopt is if you end up keeping that dog, that's amazing. But if you don't, you just fostered it. You found it its home. So I almost actually kept the dog I had before Simon. And it was a heart-wrenching decision, but it was a puppy. And I knew ultimately that wasn't right for me. We found that dog a great home. And then that freed me up to have him. But I also will not lie. I have had some challenging foster experiences. It is an exercise in patience. I got really lucky. So the first time I actually ever fostered was in 2018, 17, I want to say. I only did it once and I had a really, really challenging experience where, like, not with Hearts and Bones, I want to be clear, I won't name the rescue, but where I think I was like kind of set up to fail. It was my first time. I was given a really challenging dog in an apartment where I could not have that kind of dog. I was living alone, all those things. And I didn't like know if I could do it again. And then I did it with Hearts and Bones. I talked to them about what my limitations were around like dogs with aggression and things that I just was like a little bit shell shocked from the last time. And they were amazing. I mean, even if I had dogs who were challenging, like very fearful or adjusting to the city, like they were all things I could handle. So I would just say, like, I think it's so important to be upfront with a rescue and be like, hey, this is my first time. I don't know what I'm doing. I need to ease into this, because I think they really worked with me, especially at the beginning when I was a little bit freaked out for my first experience, to be like, oh, like my first dog might have been the easiest dog I've ever spent time with in my life ever. Like if they had been my fifth, I would have kept them. So just to say, I think it's really good to talk and make sure that like you're setting yourself up for a foster situation that will succeed.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like there are so many different types of dogs out there and different environments. And one of our big passions at Juniper is just like the nuance in being a dog parent and how everybody's life looks different. And what I love living with in my dog might be a trait that you or Allison would find super annoying or bothersome, and vice versa. And I think fostering to adopt is such an incredible way to get a dog, because you can experience those things ahead of time. And like you said, if it isn't a fit, you still played this incredibly important role of helping them find their forever home. It's not like you made the commitment and then had to go back on it. And there's, all of those resources being used up. So this is like, I shout this from the rooftops whenever a friend says, hey, like I kind of want a dog, but I've never had a dog before. Like you need to foster to adopt. Maybe you'll find out you're not ready for a dog at all yet. Maybe you'll find out, the certain traits in a dog that you want. Maybe you'll foster fail the first dog that you bring home and it'll be perfect. But it's just such a great way to get into it.
Yeah, everything you just said. And it's always very bizarre to me. I post about my fosters online, and I'm sure you guys have seen this before where it's like, why aren't you keeping that dog? Like, how can you not keep that dog? And then we just have to go through this every time where it's like, hey, actually, when I get this dog adopted, it frees me up to take another dog. That's the whole point. If everyone adopted their first foster, we'd have a lot fewer fosters. It's just like a win-win for everyone.
I feel that so deeply. When we passed along our very first foster, so we have a resident dog. She's super fearful. She's come a long way, but like she still is not comfortable around other dogs. So whenever we fostered, we had to crate and rotate, and like it was all of these logistics. So I was so proud that we had done it. And I was also relieved when our first foster dog was leaving our home and going on to the rest of her life. The day that we like passed her along and took her back to the shelter where then she would get adopted, my dad texted me and he said, I bet she thought that you were her new home. And I was like, why would you say that?
And people make it so hard. I think people project so much of how they would feel fostering onto like how you should feel and act. And it's so weird. Why do people do that? They don't understand how hard it is to even manage your emotions around doing this. So like, yeah, what have you learned around managing your emotions around fostering? Because to me, like something that was kind of interesting was that I thought when I fostered, I would fall in love with and like foster fail every single dog and then end up with a house full of dogs. And then that doesn't necessarily happen. In fact, like you actually can be so excited to see them go to a no home. Like not every dog is your dog.
No. And I volunteer at Simon's Rescue at the Adoption events, which is also, if you just want to give back in a way that like, it's a joke to me that like to call it volunteering, to go like hang out and do social media at the adoption events and like play with puppies. Like one of my favorite things is that people will come up to us volunteers and be like, oh my God, I would just keep every dog. And we're like, the funniest thing is I am so happy to see some of those dogs go. Like, don't get me wrong. I cry every time, no matter what. But some of the dogs, I'm like, goodbye, good riddance. You destroyed my life. You were so complicated. Like, I know you're going to be an amazing dog in a month when you are trained and done and settled, but like, I don't want a puppy. I don't want a high energy dog. That's why I didn't adopt one. So happy to do it for a couple of weeks, but also happy to get my life back.
Yeah, people don't realize you get your life back when your foster gets a home.
And before I had Simon, for me, it was always like, I'm not like a neat freak. And so it was always like, well, the dog leaves, but I clean my apartment and put the crate away. But I won't lie, like some of the fosters, I mean, some of them break my heart. It is sometimes like an utterly devastating experience. And that is just like something you go in knowing that that's going to happen sometimes. And like, yeah, it's just part of the process. But like, it's so rewarding, and you watch the dog go to their new home, and that just, I mean, it like washes it
Yeah, there's
away.
nothing I love more than getting an update from one of our previous fosters and like seeing them in their new home. And I'm connected to a few people on Facebook now. It's like the only thing that I use Facebook for. It's like, how's baby Joey doing? Like, I fed him tablespoons of food on the hour when he had worms, and now he has this yard and this family. And like that experience is just so, like you said, rewarding. Like I live for it.
I think too, what you said, like, especially seeing a dog get a life that I couldn't give them. So like, especially if it's a dog who like leaves the city or like really shouldn't be in the city. You know, I live in a 1-bedroom apartment on the Upper West Side. Like that's not the right situation for every dog. So, and in a lot of situations I say in the profile, like this dog needs multiple people around. One is not enough to entertain them. They need kids. They need people running and doing stuff. Like I work from home. I have 2 careers. Like, so I think too, like seeing a dog get a life that I can't give them is the most rewarding thing. And also just like, I have no idea if all of my matches have been great. I've done 10 fosters. Like I have no idea if they've all been perfect, but I know enough of them, the results story, to just like have my heart so warmed. Like a dog that I was such a challenging foster, one of the cutest dogs I ever fostered, but fearful of everything, like plopped on my couch day one and would not leave. That is where the dog sat. I had to carry this 50-pound dog down the stairs every single time. I had to hand feed it. And that dog now lives in a huge yard with their new husky mix sibling. And the mom just had a baby, and there's all these like videos of the baby and the dog. And it's like, I was never going to give you that life. Like, this is so great for you.
That's amazing. You talked a bit about being in the city, like this 1-bedroom apartment on the Upper West Side. And we actually just traveled through New York City in our van. We live full time on the road. And that is not the environment for my dog. She was fine for a few days. I've had her long enough. We've trained, we've built the skills so that we could navigate it. But I feel like asking her to handle that would be really not fair in the long run. So what have you noticed, like being a dog mom in New York City? What are your favorite parts? What are the worst parts?
Yeah, well, so Simon was like good with New York City from the second he got off the van. I mean, you really see just such a different reaction, like picking dogs up from the transport. Some of them are just like, hey, I'm here. Like, let's go. Let's get some pizza. And some of them are like, what is going on? Like, and I'll say like some of them adjust really quickly. And then some of them you just look at, you're like, you shouldn't be here. You should be somewhere nice and quiet. Simon was definitely in the first group. He was just like, cool, let's go. He is like not alarmed by loud noises in any way, shape, or form. I grew up in New York City. Like, I love it here so much. To me, the Upper West Side is like the best place you could ever have a dog. It's such a robust dog culture. I live like right by Riverside Park. We have Central Park. And so everything just revolves around dog culture up here. It's wild. They really like run the area. So for me, it's just like getting to walk everywhere with him and take him places. Like in my dream world, he would just come everywhere with me because he's like really good at restaurants, really good at bars. Like he just wants to be included. So probably my favorite part is just like a summer in the city with him where he gets to come to outdoor bars and come to the park and sort of just like be along with me on my life on the weekends.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that because you talked a lot about like what you love about being in the city with your dog. Do you think that's a lot of what the appeal is for your following on social? Because I feel like so many people are following you and Simon and checking everything out.
Yeah, I mean, it's all really funny to me. Like, I have been tweeting for like years, and I had like a substantial following before I got Simon, but it's grown like much faster since I got him. People are just really obsessed with him, and it genuinely cracks me up So I had like a significant following just from my writing and like the dumb thoughts in my head before that. But I think it's a couple things. Like Simon is really unique looking. It's obviously like what struck me about him. And so I think just he's a dog who doesn't look like other dogs. So he catches a lot of people's eyes. This is going to sound like really corny, but I'm just a huge proponent of like putting positivity out into the internet. I work in social media marketing. That's where like most of my career has been in different industries. And the internet is such a complex place. I spend a lot of time on the internet. I am an internet like social media gremlin. And I really just like think you can't get rid of the bad stuff and you have to just like put good stuff into the universe and like make it a little bit more of a positive place, which I genuinely believe it can be. And I think that's why people like Simon. Like Twitter is dark. The world is dark. We all need a little positivity. And, you know, when it comes to like rescue dog stories and things, like this guy was homeless in Texas at 4 and now he lives in New York and is like a local celebrity. And so it's just a nice story. And honestly, nothing makes me happier than when people are like, thank you for sharing Simon with us. This makes my day better. Cause I have that relationship with different people's dogs online in the exact same way. And I know how much just seeing like a picture of my favorite dog can make the distraction I'm looking for in a bad meeting, like feel better. And so that's what I kind of assume people are reacting to, because at the end of the day, it's my life is like not that fabulous. Like I am just like a normal person in my New York City apartment. Like I don't want to pretend as if I have some like extraordinarily cool or glam life. I most certainly do not. We're mostly just like walking around the neighborhood and I'm taking little pictures because I'm obsessed with him.
Yeah, I think it especially stands out on Twitter for that reason that you said. You know, I mean, there's just not a lot of like fun, light positivity on Twitter anymore, or maybe there never really fully was, but Simon really stands out there for that reason. And the following is just like so large from that. So yeah, I think it's so nice to put that out there. Can you tell us a little bit more about the work that you do and the writing?
Yeah. So I define myself now as a freelance journalist. I don't know if that's like the official term, but yeah. So I started writing like in the Exo Jane, like personal essay world of like the mid early 2010s. And I really started writing as a way to like process some stuff I had going on in my own life. My first essay was like about my eating disorder recovery in a way that I would never write now, but I thought was like the way we all wrote back then. And so I really just like stumbled into it. And then I started having more ideas and like pitching editors randomly that I found online and probably sending them the worst, most embarrassing pitches that I would like cringe if I ever saw now. But I really had no idea how any of it worked and just like wrote and pitched and wrote and pitched. And, you know, I'd get like 1 to 2 yeses a year maybe. And then like after a couple years, I got like 2 to 4 yeses. And then that sort of went along with like, I'm putting out a few pieces a year until the pandemic. And then I connected with an editor at Vogue there at like the beginning of the pandemic and started writing for him. And he really like gave me my first chance where he was like, I have ideas. You should write them. Like, why are you not writing the ideas in your tweet? Write them for me. And I was like, oh my God, thanks so much. That's really cool. And then I basically started like figuring out how it worked. I had someone like help me learn how to write better pitches and really just like learned by doing and by working with editors and taking a lot of feedback, both in my pitches and in my writing itself. I also, when I was working in book publishing, which is where most of my like marketing career was until a couple years ago, I had a lot of side hustles because book publishing pays terribly. A couple of those were writing like sponsored content for different blogs. So I was actually writing about like pets. So like flea and tick medicine would pay the blog to write like an article about like, you know, prevention for summer. And then you work the product in. And that was, it's not like Vanity Fair, but it was my first time really doing like reported journalism where I was calling vets and interviewing people and learning how to do all that. So just to say, like, I really just taught myself through doing. And now I write pretty regularly for a lot of different places like Esquire and different parts of New York Magazine. I just wrote for Jezebel. I'm really about everything. So I made a joke on Twitter earlier this spring that I was at the same time writing like a 7,500 word reported feature on the AIDS epidemic. And then I was also working on a 700 word feature about ravioli and how portion sizes are out of control. So like, I really don't have a beat. The really nice thing about this not being my full-time job, as much as I would love it to be my full-time job one day, is that I really choose the things I write about. So I'm really in a nice position to get to only take assignments where like it actually really interests me. And so because of that, there's usually like a small personal hook that brings me in. So like, I'm annoyed about ravioli portion size, so I will be writing about that. Or like an item of clothing I love that then I write about for the strategist or something. So I like to usually the things I write about have like a personal kernel at the beginning and then I report it out.
I love that.
Ever wonder what you should be feeding your dog? I always say the best dog food is the one your dog will eat, that you can afford, and that your vet approves of. That's why we love Optimal here at Juniper. Their food meets European quality standards and is full of prebiotics, omegas, and superfoods that your dog will love. To save 20% with your Juniper discount, visit the link in our show notes.
What would your best advice be for someone who is aspiring to be a writer in a similar way and has no idea where to start?
Yeah. So my honest advice, and I feel I'm qualified and it's hopefully not obnoxious to say because it's actually how I did it, is like, you just got to pitch. You just got to write. You just got to practice. Because at the end of the day, like that is how I got almost everything I have ever written has been on a cold pitch. I guess more recently, like editors contact me, but everything up until a year or two ago was just a cold pitch. So like you find editors on Twitter who have their emails in their handles. You know, I literally search like, quote, pitch me plus editor, and then go through everyone's bios and write all of them into I have like a grid where at one point I went through and I put all of them there so I would know who to pitch for different subjects. I'd say like reach out to anyone you know who does this work. Like I reply to my DMs. Other people might, I don't know if that's okay to say for other people, and like ask to see a pitch email. I send examples of my pitches to young journalists all the time so they can see what those look like. And more than anything, just practice. Understand that even if your piece doesn't get picked up, this was a really good practice experience to think about, how am I going to write the pitch? How am I going to find the editor's email? How am I going to do this? Opportunities don't just come to you when you're starting out. You have to put yourself in a position to find them. And also, it helps you get on editors' radars. Like I've been contacted by editors. Okay, here's a great example. I wrote a piece about Succession for Vulture in 2018, I want to say. That is before I really had any major bylines. I had pitched them a random idea about like the books that would be on everyone in Succession's bookshelves. It was meant to be like a funny joke piece. Like Logan Roy reads like The Art of the Deal and, The Art of War and stuff like that. That piece, I never got a response. But then in the last episode of season 2 of Succession, Shiv Roy is reading a very specific Sally Rooney book, and they wanted to assign something on that. And he remembered that someone had pitched him on that book being on Shiv Roy's bookshelf in my pitch. And so he reached out to me and was like, can you deliver this tomorrow morning? So I stayed up all night writing it. And it's like, that is truly just because I had an idea and sent a cold pitch. And I don't even think I knew how to send good pitches at that point. So it was probably a bad pitch. So this is a really random world. And I would honestly say you just have to be willing to put yourself out there and understand that you're going to get a lot more no's or no responses than yeses.
I love that. And you have like such a hustle for just getting this stuff out and just trying. What do you think helps you to do that? Did you build up a rejection muscle, or are you just this type of person? Like, how are you able to put yourself out there without it being perfect or polished or waiting for someone to give you permission? How do you do that?
Is saying that I'm a Leo an inappropriate answer? God, I'm like a Leo only child from Manhattan who did theater. So probably all of those things combined, but I don't want to lie. Like I have a lot of like personal anxiety, and I am like a maniac when I have pitches out. Like I refresh my inbox every like 30 seconds and just stare and I have imposter syndrome like literally every day. I only started calling myself a writer last year. So, when I already had like 50 bylines. So people would be like, you're a writer. And I was like, how dare you call me that? And then someone goes, you need a count. And I was like, how dare you? And then I did. And I was like, fine, I'll call myself a writer. So just to say, if I hadn't though been hustling for a decade, putting my bylines out there, I wouldn't have gotten now to the place where people come to me and ask me to write. So I don't know how else you do it unless like you luck into somehow like becoming a staff writer at the New Yorker out of college and you're like that one person. But if you're, looking to just try and like put your writing out there, yeah, like take the time, learn how to write a pitch, be smart, don't waste editors' times. I think too, and this is something I have really only learned more by like happenstance of like random comments from editors or seeing them tweet about this, but I think being easy to work with goes a really long way. Like I am pretty type A. So like the idea of missing a deadline isn't really on my radar. I can't imagine what that would mean. I can't imagine not doing what I said I was going to do. And I hear all the time from people like, hey, I got ghosted by this writer. Hey, this happened. And don't get me wrong, like I have had some shady stuff happen from the other side where like editors ghost you. Don't want to sound like I'm bad mouthing writers, but I do think just in general, like I would always give someone that advice that being like nice, good at taking critique, easy to collaborate with. I do think at the beginning I had a way harder time being edited. That took me a really long time to get used to. Because I think especially when my writing was a bit more personal at the beginning, it is really hard to have someone critique your personal essay because you're like, this is my experience. Like I know it better. And learning to love the editorial process took me a while and now I love it. I love working with editors. I think especially being freelance, never having worked in a newsroom or in a magazine, situation, it is such a blessing for me when someone else comes in and helps. And when someone else makes my work better, I don't see it as like a threat anymore. I see it as a collaboration. And so I think going into being a new writer, just being really open to feedback and open to saying like, I may not know how to do this, but here's the story idea I have. And hey, here's why I'm the right person to write it. Even though I'm not the most experienced writer, here's why you should take a chance on me. Think about what perspective you have that someone else can't offer. If I was a young writer, if I was a decade younger right now, I would be like, hey, what perspective do I as a 24-year-old have that the 34-year-olds like me with more bylines don't have? And where can I add to a conversation in a way that my inexperience due to age or whatever is actually a huge benefit for me? Not trying to say like, hey, I'm going to go report on this national news story that all the other reporters are doing. And honestly, I do that too as a freelance writer where I'll have an idea for something and I'll be like, there are people with newsrooms behind them who are going to be reporting this, who don't have full-time jobs, who have the resourcing and the sources to do this better than I can. This probably isn't one for me to like try and take on. So I think just like looking at where you uniquely and individually can contribute to a conversation. And that's where you try to get your first byline, not on the story that everyone else is reporting on. Well,
Yeah,
you'll get a lot
I feel
further.
like I'm hearing some parallels almost to the fostering conversation about finding the things that are the right fit for you, understanding that, some ideas, some pitches, some dogs are a better fit for certain people. And also maybe going through some of those challenges. One of the things that I'm most thankful for in my journey with my own dog, who I did not foster before adopting and who has been very challenging, is that, Allison and I talk about this all the time. There have been times where I've just felt like the world is ending and I am the worst. And then we figure it out. And it's like, if we can do that in one area of our lives, I never really thought that it would be dog ownership. I always thought that would be like the fun, sunshiny thing. But if we can figure that out in one area, then I feel like that lets us practice in other areas. So you've had these challenging fostering experiences. You've done so much trial and error on the writing side and being willing to put yourself out there with editors. I find that really inspiring and also really validating.
Yeah. I mean, I foster now. So my dog does not love fostering. We're trying to figure it out. Simon would really like to be an only child. I would really like us to keep fostering for the obvious reasons we've talked about. So we're figuring it out. But I typically now foster when like I'm in a rut or in a really bad place mentally or like need to shake myself out of something. So like if I go through like the end of like a relationship ending, or I've only had like short-term things like since then, but like I remember something like 3 months in just sort of fell apart like a year ago or whenever it was. And I was like, this is the reset I need. I don't want to think about myself or like this stupid thing. I want to just like displace that. And it was a really stressful foster experience, but like it was exactly the like cleanse and reset I needed to just be like, oh, there's other more important things going on. Like this is what matters. It just like really grounds me. And I don't want to say that without expressing the other side, which is I almost always panic 2 days into my foster situation. Sometimes it's the easiest dog in the world and you're like, oh, cool, no big. But anytime I've had a younger dog, especially, I'm just like, how am I going to do this? And you figure it out every time, like you said. And it's just like you get through it and it was so worth it. And I do find that experience just like very emotionally resetting in a way that I think I like often need.
Yeah, it's so true because I think it's like a way to give back and get outside of yourself, but also it's like it's there the whole time. You know, you're not just going to volunteer for 2 hours or something. Like this thing is living in your house for this amount of time and you have to figure out what it needs and how to deal with your other dog and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think it is such a good thing to do to emotionally reset, as you said. Like, it sounds like you have such a good grip on knowing yourself and knowing what works for you and what you want out of life. Like, this is the sense that I get from you and from your content and things that I see online. Like, something I'm curious about is, like you said, oh, I'm super into social media. I forgot what word you used, but social gremlin. How do you handle that? Because, like, I feel like for so many people, social media becomes such like a negative thing. The attention on them can be negative. Even in the pet space, we talk about this a lot, you know, like talking about people having like fights on Instagram about the right way to do this with your dog or the right way to do that. How do you handle just having those extra eyes on you or even just your own personal relationship to social?
Yeah, I've definitely like been on a big journey. So I think it's important to remember that I work in social marketing. So I have a little bit of a different perspective on this because I do it all day for work and I like fundamentally understand it. I think in a intellectual is the wrong word, but a like analytical way that takes some of the emotion out of it for me. But that took a long time. I used to have like extreme emotional attachment when I ran accounts in publishing, when I like ran the Random House accounts. I cared more about that than anything on my personal social. And those comments would like destroy me. It was just because I was like posting all day, every day. The voice was me, the photos were me, the everything was me. And we had so many followers and people had so many opinions. Like that really got me. Now that I don't run accounts for work, which was when I changed jobs, my number one priority, like I have a much, I think, healthier relationship. So when it comes to my personal stuff, I kind of have to go by platform because I actually have like really different philosophies. So Twitter, I've had a very long journey with, and I used to approach Twitter very differently and really let it get to me. And my number one thing on Twitter now is protecting my mental health. So if a tweet is getting like weird replies of mine, whether it's a reply I leave on someone else's tweet or a tweet of mine, and I don't like the vibes, I delete it just immediately. I have no interest. No amount of engagement is worth it to me. Like literally, who cares? And that's like, even if I fully defend the tweet, it's just like I'm being misinterpreted. I don't feel like defending myself. I do not fight with people on Twitter. I used to go back and forth years ago with people and like, whatever. If someone is annoying me or says something rude, immediate block. I do not care. You have no access to me or my content. I literally do not care. I had a really scary situation happen in 2018 where I got doxxed because I said something about Kavanaugh during the hearings. And I had like death threats, rape threats. They tried to get me fired from my job. I literally said, don't fuck men who support Kavanaugh and got like death threats for like weeks. Like people found my parents' phone number. Like it was really bad. And so that was like a huge learning experience, which like, I don't care. Who cares if I'm getting likes? Who gives a shit? Delete the tweet. I don't care. So I tweet Twitter with like a real easy breeziness these days where like I'm here to share photos, make little jokes. I'll tweet something serious about Palestine or like abortion rights or like, I understand I have a lot of followers, like always happy to speak up about that kind of stuff. But like in general, like, no, I'm not doing anything on there to try and like spend more time on the platform than I need. I also like scroll for fun, like 5 minutes, pop off, just having fun. I guess kind of the same on Instagram. Like the fact that I have any followers on Instagram is like hilarious to me because I am just posting pictures of like my breakfast and Simon and like flowers and like nice trees in my neighborhood. And if people want to follow my personal Instagram, like that's cool. I can't imagine ever thinking like strategically about it. Simon's is different. So I work in social media and influencer marketing. And so like Simon's, I try to be strategic on because I would like him to have followers because it's just fun and it's kind of like a sport to me now. And it's also just because like I've done it for work and for businesses for so long. And I also like do influencer deals for my job. And so now I'm like, okay, ready to be on the other side of that equation a little bit. And so I've just had so much fun with it. Someone recently was like, wow, it seems like you put a lot of time in. And I was like, see, that's where you're mistaken. I can do this in my sleep. It was my job for so long. It takes me like 10 minutes a day. And it's really just like fun. Again, I enjoy putting the positivity out. Oh my God, if anyone tried to be rude to us on Simon's Instagram, I would be like, get out of here. I'd be like, no one has time for that. We're promoting dog adoption. Like, who cares? So I really do just like try to, I guess the short answer would be that I try to skirt away from the dark side of it, really, because I just have no interest in participating. The internet is not the real world, and people who want to fight on the internet instead of like taking actual actions to make the world a better place in the real world just don't really have any interest to me. And so, yeah, I try to just like keep it pretty positive because I don't see the point of the negativity. I think it's a huge waste of time, but it did take me a long time to get there.
Yeah, something I think is really helpful about having a dog is that we talk about a lot is like it gets you back into the real world. So our phones are so addictive. They're pulling us in, social media, all of this. But then we have to go for a walk and we have to feed our dogs and play with them. And then now you're just in something that's real. That's been so helpful for me. And part of why I wanted to start Juniper, actually, because I was like, wait, this is really valuable right now. Like anything we have that can bring us into the real world and back to this and kind of like away from our phones, the better. And so then now, we're making content about dogs. And so we're about like pulled back in. How do we do this in a healthy way? All of that kind of stuff. So I love that you've found like such a good balance with that too.
Yeah, I think you just have to like protect yourself and remember that like no amount of engagement is worth your mental health. So just like walk away.
Yeah, that is a lesson that I wish I would have learned a little bit earlier on my own dog page, but one that's been so invaluable. Once you figure it out, and I remind myself that what matters is that my dog is happy and that I'm happy and that we're out here, like you said, in the real world, which is not the internet.
No. And honestly, like with Simon's social, like yes, I can make a million jokes about like influencer marketing and stuff. And I would love to provide him with a beautiful life like that. But at the end of the day, like I just want to promote dog adoption and dog rescue and fostering. And like so few people, I think too, when we're in our worlds around this, like we know so much about dog rescue. And it seems like me and all of my friends know everything about dog rescue. And then I meet people constantly who are like, I never thought you could adopt a dog. Like, what? Or people who have never considered fostering or don't understand that there's all different kinds of breeds at rescues, or you can get all different kinds of dogs. And so truly, like, I'm sure you've gotten messages from people on your social being like, oh, like you inspired me to do X, or like, thanks for answering that question. And like, that's at the end of the day, the whole point of it. If we can just show, I think too, with rescues, Simon is a mixed breed. He's an older dog that I adopted. He's from Texas, like all this stuff. And it's like, okay, there are 40 Simons coming up in a transport from Hearts and Bones every other week. And so just like spreading awareness about them, we've done like a lot of fundraising and stuff. So, if people want to leave me like the occasional weird comment being like, don't let your dog do that, or like, it's like, all right, sure. Like that's not negating this.
Yeah, you're focused on the bigger picture. I think that's so healthy.
Yeah. And I think, Allison, what you said too about sort of like knowing myself and my limit. So I'm 34, I'm turning 35 this summer, and I just spent a long time on the internet. I joined Twitter in like 2022. I was like, the first like MySpace generation and all that stuff. And so I think because it's so heavy in my job and in my free time, because it's sort of like part of my, oh God, I hate like the words personal brand, but like it does relate to the writing and all of that. It's just been really important to figure out like what adds to my life and what takes away from it. And social media, I do believe it can be really additive, but as we all know, it can be really detracting. And so I just try to be like hyper aware of, when is this crossing into like a toxic moment? Like, when am I engaging with someone that like my heart rate is racing now? Like, I'm going to walk with my dog and I'm thinking about that comment. It's like, this is crazy. Like, I don't know this person. And just really trying to like look for those moments in myself and being like, OA.
Yeah, I love that. I think that that's like a skill that we all have to develop. And we're also such different people too, like figuring out like how this works for you or what to do. And I think so many people are struggling with that and not talking about it to the point where it comes up on probably like every podcast we do. Somehow we're talking about social media too. And just this like stress that it brings to all of us. But I love what you're saying about rescue because I think it's so true that so many people don't even know the basics. And when you're in that world, you think like, well, you take it for granted. Everybody knows you can go adopt a dog and that there's 40 great dogs just like Simon coming up every week. Like really putting it like that, I think is so important because I think people think in order to get a rescue, you have to hit some kind of lottery or that you'll be looking forever. Or like some of it is just really getting connected to the right rescue in your area that you see the type of dogs that are coming through and then you follow that. That's how we found our dog. You know, we just followed a rescue and we just sort of waited for pictures to pop up. And then we took this huge chance, you know, knowing what I know now, I think I would have like maybe done a little more research or like I definitely would have fostered first. We ended up with the best dog in the world, but like I definitely would have fostered like multiple dogs for a long time and then picked my favorite dog. But yeah, people think it's going to be this like really impossible thing to find any good dog in a rescue and that they're all broken or damaged in some way and that it's this impossible thing. And so the only thing to do is go to a breeder. And it's like, there's tons of great dogs, but it is about finding like the dog who's the right fit for you. And that's why we love fostering too, because there's no other way to do that other than to really try it out, you know? So I think, yeah, people need to be a little less scared of that. I think it's so cool that you're sharing all of this, like really showing what fostering can be and rescue. And I think just living by example is the best way to do that. So thank you for dealing with the harder parts of the internet in order to be able to show that good stuff, because I think that that's so important.
Yeah, happy to. And also, social is like how a lot of my fosters have gotten adopted. A lot of my followers have come not just from Simon, but when I foster, I see a huge uptick. I mean, just like in engagement and followers and everything. It's like crazy. And a lot of the dogs like have found their home because someone saw my post or like someone sent from my post. So I think too, that's like a little bit of the reason why I'm like saying like, I'm pushing my son to do something. I'm like, well, I'm pushing Simon to like experiment with fostering again, because I do feel like I'm in this like very privileged, like unique position with those followers to like help find the dog I'm with. Like my fosters get adopted very quickly typically because just like they have more visibility. And so I feel like I want to use that for good, but if I don't have a dog, we can't do it.
But it's a lot. So it has to be the right time for you. It has to be right for Simon. You have to find the right fit for that. So, but you're doing great. And like, okay, where can people find you, follow along your life with Simon and read your writing?
So my handle is S and Vershbow at Twitter and at Instagram. SophieVershbow.com is where all my writing is. Or if you just Google me, no one really has my last name. And then you can follow Simon specifically at Upper West Simon on Instagram and TikTok.
Yay. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. We learned so much from you.
Thanks so much for having me.
That's all for today. To learn more and discover the best handpicked pet products, visit Juniper at www.juniperpet.co.